It's 2 p.m. on Thursday, October 16th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories making headlines at this hour. Much attention still lies on what the two Koreas discussed at their surprise military talks yesterday. Speculation is that the North may be ready to discuss the 2010 sinking of South Korea's warship Cheonan. President Park Geun-hye asks Italian businessmen to share their experiences with Korea's small and mid-sized firms while also asking for international support on her vision to reunite the two Koreas. And a South Korean official at the UN publicly says the issue of Japan's wartime sexual abuse of women needs to be solved immediately. This as Tokyo forms a special committee to tackle the matter. But we begin with yesterday's rare inter-Korean meeting between senior military officials. The South Korean government says issues that will ease cross-border tensions, especially in the West Sea, were discussed, but experts speculate they went a bit deeper. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
A familiar face was present at Wednesday's inter-Korean military talks. North Korea's chief delegate Kim Young-chul is suspected by the South as having engineered the attack on the South Korean warship Cheonan 4 years ago. He also threatened Seoul on television last year ahead of joint military drills between South Korea and the United States.
We will counter with our diverse, miniaturized nuclear weapons. With the press of a button, everything will turn into a sea of fire.
Experts say North Korea may be seeking to discuss the sinking of the warship and the South Korean sanctions that followed at the upcoming high-level talks slated for late October or early November. Seoul has been adamant that the heavy economic sanctions will not be lifted until Pyongyang takes responsibility for its actions.
North Korea could seek compromise by expressing regret for the incident in the West Sea in 2010 and promising efforts to prevent recurrences.
The sanctions, which halted nearly all inter-Korean trade and prevented fresh South Korean investments in the North, have been a major obstacle in improving ties between the two Koreas. Others say North Korea proposed the military talks to get a grasp of South Korea's true intentions and to set the agenda for their planned high-level talks. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
And staying with inter-Korean issues, South Korea will be picking up the remainder of the bill for North Korea's participation in the Indonesian Games, which wrapped up earlier this month. Seoul's Unification Ministry says since North Korea already provided $190,000 to partially cover the accommodations for its athletes, South Korea's final bill comes to around $520,000. An official at the ministry said that it is the first time Pyongyang has paid anything in association with its participation in the Asian Games. A day before the Asia-Europe Summit meeting, President Park Geun-hye spoke at the Italy-Korea Business Forum in Milan on Wednesday. She called on Italian family-owned companies to share their know-how with Korea's small and mid-sized firms. ARIRANG's presidential office correspondent Cheonan has this report.
Despite being two of the world's top 10 trading nations, Korea and Italy's trade volume stood at $8.5 billion last year. That makes Italy Korea's 29th trading partner and Korea Italy's 26th. Highlighting Seoul and Rome's 130 years of diplomatic relations and economic similarities, President Park, meeting with Korean and Italian business leaders in Milan, said there still remains great potential for the two sides to cooperate economically. In particular, she talked about Italy's family-owned businesses passed down from one generation to the next that make up more than 80% of the country's GDP.
이탈리아 기업인 여러분이 장수 기업을 키워온 경험과 노하우를 한국의 중소기업들과 적극 공유하셔서 한국에서도 수백 년 이상 가는 가업 승계 기업들이 많이 태어나기를 바랍니다.
Touting Italy's strength in basic sciences and new energy, President Park said combined with Korea's manufacturing technology and IT, the two sides could co-produce innovative products at the center of a new growth engine. The president later met with Korean residents in Italy and acknowledged their achievements, especially in the cultural arts and fashion, would help better bridge the two sides. She also asked them to seek Italian support for Seoul's efforts to bring the two Koreas together and prepare for the costly process of unification.
통일을 이루기 위해서는 우리 내부의 준비도 필요하지만 국제사회의 지지를 얻어내는 것이 매우 중요합니다.
On Thursday, President Park will make her debut at the ASEM with Eurasia Initiative high on her agenda. And she will largely focus on North Korean issues during talks with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on the sidelines of the summit. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News, Milan.
Japan's wartime sexual enslavement issue needs to be dealt with right away. That's what Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN said at a public meeting, but Japan keeps on saying the issue was already solved a long time ago. Kim Min-ji has the details.
South Korea's deputy ambassador to the United Nations is calling on Japan to solve the sexual enslavement issue in a prompt manner. Speaking at the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly on Wednesday local time, Han Chung-hee said the unresolved issue was a key part of tackling sexual violence during conflict. He said Japan's continual denials undermine a landmark statement Tokyo issued in the early 1990s that acknowledged this fact and constitutes a direct challenge to the historical truth. Han added that considering the advanced age of the victims, this issue needs to be taken care of without delay. And moving in the opposite direction of Seoul's request that Tokyo acknowledge and show sincerity for its wartime atrocities, Japan has reiterated its previous stance, saying the legal issue of reparation was resolved long ago. In another move that's sure to stir up tension, Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party will establish a special committee that will deal with the sex slave issue. According to the Japanese daily Nihongeijai Shimbun, the party will set up a committee this month aimed at restoring Japan's honor and will be in charge of dealing with related information to be relayed around the world. Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida also says Tokyo will consider the best course in order to win understanding from the international community. Ahead of the 50th anniversary next year of normalizing ties, the two Northeast Asian neighbors don't seem to be narrowing their deep diplomatic differences. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
After another healthcare worker in the U.S. was confirmed to have contracted Ebola, questions and concerns about safety protocol there are rising. U.S. President Barack Obama promised a much more aggressive response to stop the spread of Ebola, which has already killed thousands in West Africa since earlier this year. Our Shin Se-min reports.
A second healthcare worker who treated a now-deceased Ebola patient in Dallas has tested positive for the virus. 29-year-old Amber Vincent has been transferred to Emory University Hospital in Atlanta for treatment. The case is stoking fears of a bigger spread of Ebola. Vincent traveled on a domestic commercial flight to Cleveland from Dallas this week, despite having an elevated temperature and extensive exposure to the virus. She reportedly contacted the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention beforehand to ask if she could get on the plane. She was reportedly told she could. U.S. President Barack Obama has canceled campaign events over the recent cases.
What I've directed the CDC to do is that as soon as somebody is diagnosed with Ebola, we want a rapid response team, a SWAT team, essentially from the CDC, to be on the ground as quickly as possible and making sure that all the protocols are properly observed, that the use of protective equipment is done effectively, that the disposal of that protective equipment is done properly.
In a scramble to prevent the spread, the first human trial of a Canadian-made Ebola vaccine began on Monday in Maryland. But there's no timetable for when the vaccine may be ready for actual victims. The confirmed death toll in the Ebola outbreak has exceeded 4,400, most of them in West Africa. The World Health Organization warned this week that the number of new Ebola cases could soar to as many as 10,000 a week in the hardest-hit countries of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea by the end of the year. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Tensions keep on rising in Hong Kong with a new video going viral. It shows police punching and kicking a pro-democracy demonstrator. Hong Kong police said it is looking into reports that a group of 6 or 7 plainclothes officers had taken a handcuffed man named Ken Sang into a corner and beat him while others kept watch. Sang's lawyer said his client suffered serious injuries. The incident occurred as the city saw some of its worst clashes Wednesday between police and protesters since the pro-democracy rallies began. Hong Kong's security chief said the officers in question have been temporarily removed from their current duties. In the year 2012, for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. Consumer sentiment may have rebounded from the deadly Seoul ferry disaster back in April, but that's not enough to get the Korean economy back on a bullish recovery track. External uncertainties still pose a threat, and concerns are mounting as the nation's exporters may now be facing an even more difficult time. Hwang Ji-hye has more.
Sluggish domestic consumption and investment in Korea have caused some headaches for the nation's economic policymakers in recent years, but concerns over the country's exports could be about to turn those into full-blown migraines. Facing tepid growth in the Eurozone, the central bank projects exports, the country's traditional growth engine, to slow down the road.
It's a fact that the Eurozone economy is in a bad state because exports take up half of Korea's GDP. The global economy will, of course, have a massive impact on the domestic economy.
But the situation at home is not much better. Korea's facility investment in August dropped over 10% from the previous month, while overall industrial output sank 0.6%. Retail sales rose around 3% on month, but that was mainly due to a seasonal factor as the country's biggest holiday, Chuseok, fell earlier in the year compared to last year. In the face of such gloomy data, the central bank has announced a new growth outlook, cutting it to the mid-3% level. It also lowered its key interest rate to 2%, marking a drop to the record low set at the height of the global financial crisis in 2009. With the record low key rate in place and aggressive stimulus measures going full steam ahead, all eyes are on whether the measures will be enough to give the economy a much-needed boost. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
New data shows the Korean government's yearly forecasts for economic growth and tax revenue over the last few years were mostly far off the mark. In a report submitted for the parliamentary audit, the finance ministry was shown to have missed their growth forecast estimate by an average of 2.2% every year since 2009. And things weren't much different for tax revenue. The ministry's yearly estimate was short of actual revenue by more than $4 billion on average. The world's largest telecommunications conference is set to kick off in Korea's second biggest city, Busan, in just 4 days' time, and eyeing to seize the chance to show off their latest gadgets and technologies to the rest of the world are Korean IT firms. Our Song Ji-sun has this report.
During the 3-week ITU Plenipotentiary Conference, a handful of related conventions will be held at the Busan Exhibition and Convention Center, ranging in topics from health ICT to big data. They will all provide a glimpse into the future. The 5th-generation mobile network will be at the heart of all the state-of-the-art telecom technologies to be exhibited during the ITU conference period. The mobile technology enables users to download a high-definition movie in just 1 second. Samsung Electronics on Wednesday succeeded in establishing a data transfer environment of 1.2 gigabytes per second inside an automobile running at 100 kilometers per hour. Korea's 3 major mobile carriers, SK Telecom, KT and LG U+, will unveil their latest technologies at the World IT Show, kicking off with the ITU conference. SK Telecom aims to become the world's leading provider of 5G technology, which is often referred to as being beyond 2020 mobile communications technologies. For the exhibition, SKT will be transferring its mobile team to the port city, which will allow people to experience a smart home environment connected through the Internet of Things. KT will set up a ubiquitous zone to display its smart energy, healthcare, and integrated security systems. On the sidelines of the main conference, the CEOs of Korea's leading ICT companies will also share their insights and unveil their visions for the future. The speakers will include the chiefs of internet portals Naver and Tom Kakao, and KT President Hwang Chang-yu will give a keynote speech on the creative economy and Gigatopia on the 27th of October at the Global ICT Premier Forum. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
And on to another big international event. Representatives from about 150 countries are holding high-level talks in the eastern Korean city of Pyeongchang this Thursday. This is part of an international convention on biological diversity under the United Nations. 아리랑's Park Ji-won tells us more.
In a midterm review of the implementation of a strategic plan for biodiversity, representatives from scores of countries gathered at the conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity agreed that the global community has fallen short of achieving goals that were set to be completed by 2020. To adapt, the meeting is adopting the Pyeongchang Roadmap, which was reorganized and rearranged previous plans and measures so that they are more realistic.
I think the outcome of the conference will be good, but we need people to live up to all the commitments.
One of the problems is a lack of financial sources. Currently, less than 20% of necessary financial resources for maintaining biodiversity have been pledged. Korean Prime Minister Chung Hong-won, in his keynote speech, vowed to double the amount of Korea's official development assistance in the area of biodiversity by 2015. He also said Korea would take on a bigger role in bridging the divide between developed and developing countries. The two-day high-level meeting will end on Thursday evening with the adoption of the Gangwon Declaration, which will summarize initiatives and suggestions made during the nearly three-week conference to protect some 1.5 million species on Earth. Park Ji-won, 아리랑 뉴스.
The 2014 Asian Para Games will begin this weekend in Korea's western port city of Incheon. Our Ji Myung-gil introduces us to a special group of athletes and their partners who will give them a guiding hand.
Choi Moon-jung has 11 years of experience in wheelchair dance, and she has two male partners who help her complete her moves.
I've been run over by her wheelchair so many times, it hurts.
She sits down on the wheelchair and moves to the rhythm.
Men usually do the leading, but my partner leads better than me.
She has to practice with her two dance partners all the time, but she refuses to be drawn on who she feels more comfortable with.
If I dance with Park Geun-hye, I feel as though my dress has wings. If I dance with Choi Jong-chul, we fight a lot, but he's very understanding.
Tandem cycling also requires a riding partner. It's vitally important that the visually impaired cyclist pedals in sync with his or her partner. The partner who sits in the front saddle is responsible for pointing the bike in the right direction.
I tell him to step on the pedals faster to keep him on his toes.
I get worn out fast.
Kim Jong-gyu, who is totally blind, has been riding with his partner for 3 years and is looking to win 4 gold medals from 2 track and 2 road events. The Incheon Asian Para Games kick off on Saturday. Physically challenged athletes from 41 countries will compete in a total of 23 sports events. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
It's not new to find artists these days putting modern twists on the traditional, but what happens when you flip things the other direction? Our Im Yoon-hee joins us today to show us exactly what happens. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon. So the people who are going to be doing this is the National Orchestra of Korea. Now, they're one of the leading groups here in the country, known mostly for their versatility. They can play both the Korean traditional instruments along with the more classical period instruments. So recently they created a new production. Take a look.
The steady beat, then a slow buildup, in adrenaline, in instruments. But suddenly, it goes back to where it all started. It's a rhythmic cycle of going forward, then backward, of building momentum, then somehow finding a way back home. It's a reversal, an undoing of what's been done.
The term yuk can be translated to reverse and is an important term in East Asia. Everything has movement, a flow of life that's part of a cycle, where now going in reverse is essential to start again.
But it's in this process of going in reverse where something new is born. And instead of snare drums and piccolos, the National Orchestra of Korea members have taken up their puks and their pidis, along with other traditional Korean instruments, to recreate the steady tempo of Maurice Ravel's classical piece, Bolero. It's a task easier said than done, as traditional Korean instruments are usually played to songs that follow the rhythm of traditional Korean music, a rhythm that greatly contrasts compared to Western styles.
Rhythm is very important in Bolero. From start to finish, the same rhythm stays consistent. But we didn't take it as is. Instead, we reshaped it through an ancient Korean tune called 굿거리. 하나, 둘, 셋, 둘, 둘, 셋, 셋, 둘, 셋, 넷, 둘, 셋. This is the representative rhythm of traditional Korean music, and so we pulled out the core elements and then applied it to Bolero. People can leave behind the old Bolero rhythm they once knew and take with them this new Bolero rhythm we've created.
Through a reverse, a new sound is created. But yuk can also mean change, and that's just what these musicians intend to do, whether it be with the rhythm or even with their instruments. It's a term that holds importance in Korean culture, an idea that with the end of one cycle is the start of another, a chance for a new beginning.
It's really fun to see. I mean, Korean traditional instruments always have this diversity, and not only in how they look, but the sounds that they make are very diverse, right? So other than Bolero, do they have other pieces of music that they're going to play?
Right, so they have a few more things prepared as well. They're going to be playing a toccata piece, which is a sharp, quick striking of the instruments and plucking of the instruments. And they'll be doing that also with the marimba instrument, so that'll be a fun piece to catch. But they also have a 사물놀이 piece, and that's the traditional Korean percussion quartet. And that's obviously one of the most popular types of traditional Korean music.
And I saw that in the report, it says it's only offered one day, October 17th,
right.
which is
so it's
tomorrow.
A very exclusive event that you can only catch tomorrow, but they have really big ambitions with this. So Wani, the director, he was appointed his seat in 2012, so a couple of years ago, but he's the youngest one to take the seat, and he's really has this big ambition to sort of integrate Korean DNA into classical music, and that's exactly what he's been doing. So he's been trying to create this innovative Korean orchestral music. So you'll see that in the performance here.
All right, but only for one day tomorrow if you want to catch it.
Right, only one night. But they have quite a few performances, and they always like to give shows to people, and they do travel around the world as well. So a very popular group here.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Yoon-hee, for today's report.
You're very welcome.
It was a rainy morning for some. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. All of the rain has stopped right now, and as you can see, we have cloudy skies here and there, but that won't affect us from getting a good amount of sunshine. And there are also chances of yellow dust in the west coastal region today. However, due to this morning's rain, we still have this cool air in the atmosphere, and it looks like the temperatures won't be rising as high as yesterday due to the strong winds. And make sure you layer up even more because this chilly weather is expected to last until tomorrow, along with some huge temperature drops into the evening. Now going over to our temperature readings for today, Seoul will peak at 19 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan is also looking bright at 20 and 23 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island will top out at 21, while Dokdo reaches 19, while Mangkeungang hits just at 20 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful day.
And that's all we have for you now. Our next newscast coming up at 4 p.m. Korea time. I'll see you then.